Hello and welcome to Just Onside. I'm your host for today's episode, Ois Ahmed, and I am joined, as always, by the man who's starting to realize what it feels like supporting a club that's no longer in the big time. Ayub Patel. Ayub, how are you?
Right, I'm very well. Don't like the dig though. Leave it out.
Well, some talk about the club potentially being sold to the 49ers. There's some rumors about potential managers coming in, even Mr. Potter, Graham Potter being in the potential stakes.
Until
But
until we actually get anything done, I'm not saying too much because there's lots of rumors as there would be. I mean, the 49ers were always, well, I say always going to buy Leeds. That was always the intention. I think the intention was that they'd be in a Premier League. Uh, that's probably the the issue at this moment in time as to what the price is. But I think that's always going to happen, or that will happen. That needs to happen before I think we can talk about managers, talk about players. So the sooner it happens, the better. But this is a Premier League show, not a Champions League show. So let's move on.
well, that brings us on nicely. The reason I let you get away with that comment is normally
Oh, you asked me a question. That's why I
I
answered.
I was gonna say the moderating police that is Badge is off the show today, so I thought I'd let you get one last comment in for Leeds. I mean, just on that note, Badge. Now, some of you dedicated viewers will have realised that earlier this season, when West Ham beat Manchester United, Badge missed the very next episode. Now, obviously, the tough result on Saturday, and here we go again. Badge is missing. He doesn't take defeats too well, you, but that's not the reason why he's not attending today's episode. The good news is that Badge has become a father for the first time. So many congratulations. Any words from yourself, Ayub?
Well, he's obviously timed that conception beautifully, hasn't he? Really, he must have preempt what was going to happen. So, congratulations to Badge. Obviously, we miss him dearly, but he obviously has other pressing matters to attend to at this moment in time.
Indeed, absolutely. So again, from myself and Ayub, congratulations. He'll be with us hopefully for the very next episode when we'll be previewing the big game in Istanbul on Saturday, Manchester City against Inter Milan in the Champions League final. Right, moving on. Well, just before we do, actually, if you've not given the channel a subscribe already, please do so. Give the episode a like, share with your friends, drop a comment below, and again, press that bell to get notified for future content. Let's dive straight in, Ayub. We had the big game on Saturday afternoon at Wembley on a glorious summer afternoon it was. We had Manchester City playing Manchester United. The atmosphere looked unbelievable. A wonderful stage and setting for the FA Cup final. Manchester City emerging victorious. 2-1. 1/3 of this panel did predict that scoreline. How did you see the game pan out from your perspective in terms of the game itself? Yeah, give us your thoughts. What do you think?
You're right about the atmosphere. I mean, obviously, we've got some friends uh, who attended the game, and to a man, they would say that the atmosphere was electric. I think it does help if it's a sunny day. I mean, I suppose, I mean, if the sun's out, it's a nice warm day. It always adds to the occasion. Plus the fact that it's two massive sides. In terms of the game, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It perhaps wasn't the high quality spectacle that we probably expected, but that's understandable. I mean, the stakes are so high. The goal within, what is it, 15 seconds, 12 seconds. It I've looked at it 2 or 3 times, and I can't really pick too many faults. I mean, you can probably say that Gundogan should have been closed down, but it's 15 seconds into a football game, so wonderful strike. De Gea absolutely flat-footed. I don't think we've talked offline. Obviously, I don't think he could have done too much. But in terms of the game, thoroughly enjoyable. As I said, it was more. I certainly City played the better football. I think they had more opportunities, but I was impressed with United. I mean, they're obviously they didn't have Martinez, or they didn't have, I think, their best defender. But I think they played well. They pressed high. I think they had a really good strategy. There wasn't, I mean, there were, I think the first 15, 20 minutes, certainly City could have been probably 2 up. They should have been. I think there was a Rodri header, which shaved the side of the goal. But it was a tight game, a good game, thoroughly enjoyable. Dodgy decisions, a little bit of controversy. I'm sure you'll sort of pick up on that later on. The equaliser, well, again, it's that constant sort of issue that we have in terms of should it be a penalty, shouldn't be a penalty. I suppose the rules are there, but I'm sure we're going to dive into it a little bit later on, so I'm not going to say too much about it. But in terms of overall, thoroughly enjoyable game. If I was a United fan, I'd certainly be optimistic going forward, because I think if they can make a few additions, they are going to be certainly a force to be reckoned with. Now, I was impressed with quite a few players. Who impressed me the most was John Stones. I've always been a massive fan of John Stones. I saw him at Barnsley. Must be about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And he impressed me then. He's one of these rarities, a ball playing centre back, which is quite an unusual thing in England. It's not such a common common thing. I was always impressed. I think at Everton as well, he impressed me enormously. I think there was question marks about his. I think some people said he tried to play too much, and maybe I suppose that could have been a fault. But that's the type of player he is. I think Guardiola, Manchester City, is his spiritual home. I think he's a perfect fit. I think he's outstanding. There's another player who reminds me, or who could be similar to John Stones, and that's Ben White. These are two wonderfully gifted football players. These are excellent players to have at the back, but they are so comfortable they can play in the midfield as well. So John Stones, outstanding. I was so impressed. I'd love to see his heat map, because I think he was everywhere. But overall, good game to watch, enjoyable. The right team won. I think it would have been a travesty if Manchester United had a won. But good to watch. Excellent spectacle. But I'm looking forward to United next season. And just one more. Garnacho, when he came on, again, this is a world star in the making. He was sensational. I think he what is he, 18, 19? So again, I can't wait to see him progress, because I think he'll just get better and better and better. And he's a player that I think will have fans on the edge of their seats. So another player to look forward to. But good game, enjoyable. I mean, I didn't have any horses in the race, so really I wasn't too bothered. But I think in terms of just justice in a game, the right team won.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with your conclusion. I'd like to actually just take some of your comments in reverse order, because I absolutely agree with you on a couple of the key points that you made there. Firstly, Garnacho, absolutely. Could not agree with you more. It's one of the actual main takeaways that I took from that game, irrespective of the result and performance and the well-deserved win for Manchester City. I think with Garnacho, what you want, and I think this is something I've been discussing offline with a few people as well, the development of football in the Premier League at the highest stage becoming more and more, let's say, coach inspired in terms of tactics, strategy, certain situations, and, kind of this tactical nuance. Is it driving some of that individual flair out of the game? And what I love about him the most is his direct nature, his consistent direct nature. And I think if you speak to any defender, whether he's one of the world's best or he's just an average defender, he'll tell you a winger running at you continuously is the one thing that they always struggle with, especially someone who's got relatively decent ball control, which he seems to have. And I think this season you've seen with Mitoma, to some extent Martinelli, a little bit with Grealish, but definitely Garnacho looks someone, especially because of his tender age, that if United can channel some of that flair and kind of get his output consistent as possible, I think you really could have a potential star in your hands. Again, there's very few players who can pick up the ball wide consistently. There was this one situation where they recycled the ball. I can't remember if it was Shaw. Shaw plays it back to him on the wide. He just trying to run at his guy time and time again, and he definitely looked full of energy when he came on. And perhaps in hindsight, and I'm not suggesting that this was a mistake, in hindsight he may think he could well have started with him perhaps instead of Sancho. That was the big selection dilemma for Manchester United was whether to put Fernandes in the middle or play with that extra midfield. In the end, they went for that extra midfielder with Fred, Casemiro, Eriksen, and then Fernandes playing slightly from the right. And I thought that was something that they would go with actually in the end. So yeah, I agree with you on the Garnacho piece. Stone's absolutely dominant in the middle of the park, and I think you coined it very nicely when you said Manchester City is his spiritual home, because you're right. It's interesting because normally English ball playing defenders, and I don't want to make the comparison, but I remember when Rio Ferdinand, but came onto the scene obviously with obviously West Ham first, but then at Leeds and then at United, and it's not to say that at United it was discouraged, but it was to some extent not something that he played with too much in the sense of that kind of. And again, I don't want to get it. Let's not get it twisted. I don't want all the United fans commenting, but it wasn't something that was a natural part of his game during his United stint, which was this natural foray into midfield. Not to say he wasn't comfortable on the ball. Far from it. He was more than comfortable, but it was just more. And I guess he had top quality players in midfield and in the forward lines. But it's interesting to see Stones where he's now returned back in a sense to his roots, which is this kind of free flowing ball playing defender who can drift into midfield and even kind of drift into attacking areas. So no, he was absolutely superb. Rodri was. I mean, the whole Manchester City team, to be fair, on the whole, it just works so well as a unit. We'll probably come back to that later on. But I just want to you mentioned about the goal early on. I mean, I was just settling down and the goal happened so quickly, I nearly missed it. Unbelievable start. It's one of the things I love about football, moments like that, because all you see is Gundogan score. Similar last year when he scored against Aston Villa, the 2 goals to deliver the Premier League title on the last day, and you just see this wonderful euphoria on the players. De Bruyne, Bernardo chasing after him, Grealish. I love moments like that in football. It's why we love the game. But yeah, once that happened, City, to your point, had a few chances. Haaland on the stretch from the Gundogan pass, Rodri with the header. Haaland once blazed over, and there were a few situations as well, I think, where they were threatening. And United didn't really show as much. City were in complete control. I mean, this football that they're playing at the moment, again, it's a puzzle that not many have solved in the last 3 months, if at all. Nobody's solved it consistently. They look utterly dominant. I just want to take some of those events there afterwards in isolation and maybe get your quick thoughts so we could just maybe run through them very quickly. I think there afterwards, and I hope I'm getting these in the right chronological order, there was an incident with Casemiro and Akanji. Akanji, slightly heavy touch, was trying to, I want to say retrieve the ball, but he was going to be on the stretch a little bit. Casemiro comes across, referee Polti, and he gives the free kick to Manchester United. VR did have a look at it. What was your thoughts on the challenge from Casemiro and Akanji?
He's a street smart character, Casemiro, and I think he knows a lot of times what he's doing. In my mind, there's no question about what he was trying to do. That was, I think he was being cute in the sense that he wasn't making it obvious, but it was, I think, on another day, another referee, perhaps, who's much more in tune with the game, perhaps sent him off, because I think there was intentional. That wasn't going for the ball. I think there was an intent. He's too good a player to make a challenge like that. You have to be. There has to be an element of intent. So certainly, from my point of view, I think Casemiro is. I won't say he's a dirty player, but certainly he's a bit of an expert in the dark arts. And I was surprised by the outcome. Because I thought there should have at least been some sort of he should have been penalised in some way. But for I certainly on another day a referee certainly with a much more understanding of the game, and we've talked about this before on an episode when we talked about refereeing. This is sometimes the problem. I think some of the referees perhaps are not former players or aware of perhaps what a legitimate challenge is and where somebody is. Maybe I suppose pushing it a little bit of gamesmanship, or maybe I suppose making it look as if it's a legitimate challenge, but there is an intent to hurt. I think Casemiro, he looks that type of player, as I said. I mean, I don't want to throw the book at him, but I've got a feeling that he was not going for the ball. He was trying to make sure that he left something on the player. Maybe not violent enough for a red, but certainly I think there should have been some action. So that he got away with it.
Yeah, I mean, on that incident, just very quickly, because there are a few more to run through. I have 2 prevailing thoughts. One is that the referee And this happens a lot. If you observe football closely, referees sometimes make decisions based on what they think will have happened and what they anticipate to happen. And what I mean by that is you'll often see crosses come in from corners and set pieces where a defender or a goalkeeper will end up sprawled on the floor alongside a melee of bodies. And they'll give a defensive free kick because it's just easier to give one. Whereas quite often you'll see kind of a little bit of pulling of the striker's shirt and what have you. So what they anticipate is, but if a defender's on the floor, surely there must have been something gone on that's impeded the defender. And when you watch that incident carefully, Akanji has a slightly heavy touch. And it's at that point, I think Paul Tierney's made an assessment, in my opinion. Once Akanji's made the heavy touch, it's as if Paul Tierney's come to the conclusion in his mind that now the United player is in control of this situation, which means Akanji's going to have to overcompensate to retrieve this ball. And thereafter, based on that, the fact that then both players have ended up on the floor, he's come to the conclusion that because the Man City player had lost control because of the slightly heavy touch, he's given the free kick to United, thinking, well, if the City player was always going to be on the stretch, given the heavy touch, and they've both now ended up on the floor, it must be the City player who's impeded the Manchester United player. And he's given the free kick to Manchester United based off what he anticipated to happen. So my point is, he's made the decision in a sense before the collision's actually taken place. That's point number one. And point number two, to your point, I think Casemiro does come across, whether he knows what he's doing or not, I'm not so sure. I think you could make the argument he's also been perhaps incredibly clumsy. I think that's maybe perhaps where I'd slightly disagree. I think what's, again, muddied the waters is that he's given the free kick to United. So the fact that he's caught him, I think, if I recollect, somewhere around the ankle area, maybe just slightly above.
Just above, yeah.
Just above. I think you're right. On another day, maybe. But again, given the fact he's given the free kick to United, I think it's one of those where it would have had to be an absolute real dangerous and reckless, or clearly a dangerous and reckless action, let's say. And again, another day, maybe it could have been. I would argue he's actually been sent off for less this season. So he's probably got away with it. But I don't perhaps feel maybe as strongly as you. Like I said, I think my biggest gripe was the fact Paul Tierney's probably made the wrong decision with the free kick in the first place. Let's move on because we've got a few to get through. And thereafter was the big talking point of the game. You've got obviously Fernandes, I think it was, floating a ball over Jack Grealish's head with the overlapping run of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And Wan-Bissaka had a very good game on the whole against Grealish. He's obviously headed it back across goal. Grealish on the, what I would call is it kind of in a pirouette position in the air, has then ended up, I was going to say handballing it, but it's hit his hand, let's be fair, which is slightly above his shoulder or in around his head area. What were your thoughts on that decision, Ayub? Do you think it was the right call? What's your view?
Well, the ruling says, I think based on the ruling, it was the right decision, wasn't it? That's what they said. As to whether it should have been a penalty, if you play the game, it's never a penalty. And therein lies the problem, doesn't it, really? Because it's a difficult argument to make when somebody just turns around and say that's the rules. So therefore, I suppose you've got to then question the rules rather than the decision that was made. The decision based on the ruling, absolutely right, but it was soft. I mean, I think they've got to look at. Somebody has to look at the decisions that are made, or in terms of the rulings, because I think it needs to be done by people who've played the game. Because really, it's farcical. Because I think if you'd asked the players, obviously the Man United players did. I mean, I think there was. I think Fernandes was probably somebody who really was absolutely insistent. So obviously he's aware of the rules. But how can you disagree when it's the rules? That's really basically, for me, change the rules. There's got to be a little bit more common sense, surely.
Well, there was a lot of reaction after the game and during the game about, and just to answer your point about, I mean, there's a VAR check going on because the ball stayed in play. Remember, it ends up in Ortega's hands, and then the game continues, and there's a VAR check continuing until Paul Tierney had to actually stop the game to then, as he was advised, to check the screen. So the VAR check happens objectively regardless. In terms of there's 2 points here. One is, was it a penalty within the rules as they are currently constructed? And there was a lot of talk saying, well, yeah, we don't like the rule, but it's a penalty. But the problem you have is that sometimes within the rules, there is still this argument about proximity. Now, you may argue that his hand was outside the silhouette. I would argue perhaps that as you're pirouetting in the air, trying to get a flick on the ball, because obviously he's trying to flick it away for a corner because he's aware of the impending danger behind him with Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He's pirouetting and your arm may well naturally come up. Some may say it doesn't come up in that way, but I think then we're getting too much into the nuance and the sciences of where your arms and legs naturally go when you're X amount of feet in the air. And I don't think we want to go down that route. So the question is, within the rules, was it a penalty? Some may say, yeah, but I've still seen many incidents this season where a penalty has been given, where a ball's been struck in close proximity. There was an incident early this season with Lucas Digne, where something similar happened. And I say similar, not the same, similar. And the major incidents in kind of committee, let's say, that rules halfway through the season about decisions that were right and decisions that were wrong, suggested that that was a wrong decision. So they actually said, because of the proximity, Lucas Digne's incident, that shouldn't have resulted in a penalty. And that's the point I have, is that when sometimes these penalties are not given, one of the justifications given is, oh, it's a little too close. Well, that's clearly not the case, because Grealish was pretty much touch tight to Wan-Bissaka in the end, or within a body length, pretty much there. So within the rules, I would argue there's definitely some scope there. And then, my major point of contention, which is that it's an incredibly unfair rule. I looked at the trajectory of that Wan-Bissaka header with Ortega already coming out. There was not a single United player that was going to get that. It was going to end up in Ortega's hands. So a situation in football that was not going to result in any attacking situation for Manchester United Football Club has resulted in, and you're going to get my percentage again, an 83% chance of scoring. So the question I ask is, if not a single United player was going to get on the end of that ball, why should that result in a penalty? And again, that's why I split the 2 points. One within the rules and one's the spirit of the game. Moving on. What did you think of the Fred incident on Kevin De Bruyne? The ball gets played into the channel or inside the box. The ball's then cut back. It comes to De Bruyne about 16 yards out, 17 yards out, centre of goal. A few bodies in between. De Bruyne is coming onto it with his left foot. And then Fred, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but steps across him. What were your thoughts on that incident?
It's a contact sport. So it is. Initially, I did think, and I even sort of today before we actually started shooting, we were talking about it. But it's one where I think it depends on which side of the bed that I get out. It could be, yes, it's a penalty. Maybe I suppose on another day I'll think it's a contact sport. But at the end of the day, there will be physical contact, and was it sufficient for it to be a penalty? So I think maybe just erring on the side of it being a contact sport, maybe not. But then the argument is there has to be consistency. On another day, that's a penalty, and that's a completely different topic, I think. But today, I'm going to say it's not a penalty.
I'll ask you tomorrow then as well.
Yeah.
I'm probably closely aligned with yourself on this one. I think if the penalty is given, the general consensus would have been, why is Fred stepping across him like that? Because remember that we've all played the game. There are times when you're looking to shield the ball where you'll step across. We're not teaching anybody anything new there. But he stepped across a tad early. The ball's in its path still on the way towards De Bruyne and Fred. So he stepped across early. And if you look at the angle from behind, he clearly makes contact with De Bruyne's, it would be his right leg. I'm with you. I think if it was given, you'd perhaps say he's been a little stupid, because we've seen trips also given as penalties, right? Where you say, well, he's made contact. And my only, again, frustration sometimes is that if that was given and you asked the next referee for an explanation, he'd say, well, he's made contact and he's not going to overturn it. And that's the thing. And I always find that a little unusual, because when it's not given, it's like there's not enough contact. And when it is given, well, there's contact, so it's a penalty. I mean, I'm with you. I don't feel overly strongly about it. But I think it's probably it's a little clumsy, and I think on another day you're giving the referee and VAR decision to make, and who knows, it might not fall on in your favour. Moving on just to the winner, Gundogan in the absolute form of his life. This is his time of the season. The last few months of the year,
Mm.
he's an unbelievable player in the form of his life. You wouldn't put it past him to make his mark on Saturday night as well. How did you see the winning goal? Obviously, De Bruyne gets fouled by Fred in the far right channel. De Bruyne obviously floats this free kick with a little bit of pace to the edge of the box. Manchester United would hope that they would have done a lot better to close in Gundogan, especially after his first half screamer. He's then obviously hit it. He's pivoted quite well. The referee's done quite well to get out of the way as well, and left-footed with a very difficult technique. Yes, he's not caught it absolutely flush, as he had to kind of take a step backwards to readjust his footing, but he's made enough of a good contact, let's say, and it's ended up in the back of the net. What were your thoughts? Some close quarters. I mean, Peter Schmeichel did a bit of analysis about what De Gea should have done. Did you think that was one where De Gea has to assume some responsibility?
I mean, it must have been blocked. I think obviously must have been a number of bodies. So, not being a goalkeeper and not being a goalkeeping expert, that's why I'm interested in find out what Schmeichel said and whether his positioning was right. But certainly it wasn't struck well. It bobbled a couple of times, or it bounced a couple of times. You'd expect a keeper of De Gea's ability and class to, even if he saw it late, because it wasn't struck firmly enough, he got a hand to it. But I don't know. I mean, what was Schmeichel's take? Because looking at it, you would have thought that he should have probably done better. But I just think it must have been difficult because the position he was in, he must have seen it really late. And I suppose even if it's not struck firmly, if you see something late, you're going to react late. So maybe getting a hand to it was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair assessment from yourself. I've watched the goal multiple times for myself, and I think whenever you see a goal where the ball's not struck well from outside the box and it ends up creeping in, not at the kind of pace that you'd expect, you're always questioning the goalkeeper, irrespective of how many bodies are in front of him, right? And he's had a few difficult moments in his career with shots from distance, even just early on this season, when Said Benrahma scored in that game against Manchester United in the when West Ham were at home and beat them 1-0. So he's had some few difficult moments this season. I mean, Peter Schmeichel was talking about the kind of this triangle that goalkeepers work to in terms of, where the ball's being struck from and where he needs to be. And his main take essentially was that he needs to take a step forward to kind of close down the angles. He's a little too close to his line. Having watched it, I do agree with him to some extent, but where he's a little unlucky, I think, De Gea, is, to your point, he can't see. And what he does is, just at the moment of the ball being struck, he jumps in the air with a slight lean over his left shoulder, if I can say, sort of slight lean. And what that does is, one thing you can't do scientifically, I've tried it, is when you jump straight up in the air, you can't jump left or right. And as he jumps straight in the air, you're trying to
I was
test
trying to
that.
work yeah.
Exactly.
In my mind.
You're still trying to work out that true or false from the last
Yeah.
episode. But no, what he's done is, as a kind of an anxious moment, just as Gundogan's about to strike the ball, he jumps up in the air with a slight lean to try and see through a few bodies, which means that he's then, as the ball struck, he's not able to react quickly enough and take a couple of quick steps to block it on his right-hand side. Watch it again, you'll see what I mean. And I think that's what's unfortunately been his undoing, which is that kind of little jump step that he takes just at the time the ball is struck. I think he'll be disappointed, and I think Manchester United will be, his team will be a little disappointed that he's not been able to kind of claw that away. The ball's not struck well enough, even though I think Gundogan's technique, given his adjustment, was incredible. I think he'll probably, as a top goalkeeper in a cup final, he'll feel a little disappointed, if you ask me.
I mean, I'll sort of watch it again. I mean, I suppose as a keeper, the objective should always be trying to always make sure that you've got your eye on the ball. So for how long he didn't see the ball, I'm not too sure, but it looked difficult from the angle that Gundogan scores or he hits the ball. There's a couple of bodies that he passes before it sort of gets to the goal. So it must have been awkward. Obviously, it's a corner, so it's a packed penalty box. So I'm probably going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's a Premier League goalkeeper. He's an international keeper, so maybe I suppose there is a question about his positioning. Maybe if he couldn't see the ball, he should follow the trajectory of the ball. So I don't know what he's done again. I mean, it's obviously a floated ball from Kevin De Bruyne, so he must have been able to track the ball. So maybe he should have moved to the right hand side perhaps a little bit earlier. But I'm not a goalkeeping coach, so I have no idea what the best strategy is for a keeper. But uh, I think he will be disappointed because obviously got a pour to it, but it just wasn't enough. But in the end, it was a deserved result. So I don't think he should beat himself up about it. It wasn't something where he can turn around and say, "Oh, we were dominating and let something in which shouldn't have been a goal."
Yeah, I agree with your overall conclusion. It was a deserved win for Manchester City, and obviously, I mean, Manchester United will. I think there was some talk before the game from a lot of Manchester United supporters that I know and that you know about how it wasn't going to be a close game, and I always felt it'll be a tight game, at least score-wise, just because it's the final. Manchester City are chasing a treble. It's like even if they go a goal up, why are they going to play gung ho trying to get 2, 3, 4, and 5? Yes, if it happens organically, fine. But I always wondered that, well, yeah, if you take a lead in a cup final, generally speaking, you tend to kind of just want to protect because you've worked so hard to get to that point, and you're not playing a team where the margin for error is vast. You're playing a team invariably in any cup final where the other team may not necessarily be your equal, because who is the equal of Manchester
Mm.
City right now, but a team that's capable of hurting you, which Manchester United
Absolutely,
clearly are.
absolutely.
So I think I always felt it was going to be a tight, but you're right, deserved win, and I think Manchester United will go again. I think they've had a really good season this year. Obviously, one cup win in the Carabao Cup, another great run in the FA Cup, and yeah, on another day, if they weren't playing arguably the best club team in Europe, they may well come away with 2 cup trophies. They've finished third. They'll be playing Champions League football next season, and they'll be looking to the summer, A, to resolve the issue around the ownership, B, to get the recruitment right, and then to kick on next season where they really will be hoping to challenge Manchester City on a more consistent basis. Just a quick comment from yourself, Ayub, just on Manchester City. That's obviously 2 trophies now, the Premier League as well as the FA Cup. So that's 2/3 of the way there to a treble. No doubt we'll be diving into this on our next episode in terms of the Champions League final preview. But in terms of the football they're playing right now, how do you see it just in the kind of grand scheme of what is obviously an incredible team?
Um, I mean, I suppose the final perhaps wasn't City at their absolute best, but it just shows. I mean, they were effective. They did what they had to do. They played well enough against a decent Man United side. I mean, going back to what I said at the early part of the show, I was impressed. I was impressed with uh, Ten Hag's setup. I think they pressed high, but certainly in terms of City, they've been absolutely outstanding. It really is. As a City fan, you must be. I think uh, can it get any better? Because this is a team that's playing exceptionally well and it's winning. I think it would be fitting for them to lift the Champions League as well. I think they've played so well. This is perhaps been Guardiola at his best. I think tactically as well, he was perfect on. I mean, the role that I think John Stones had. Uh, it was. I mean, that's kudos to Guardiola. That's an excellent piece of uh, management, excellent tactic. Because in a sense, I suppose you wouldn't have expected Stones perhaps to have that much of an influence, but perhaps he's not obviously seen as a danger man. So there's a lot of times he's always in space. He utilised the space. So I think John Stones embodies exactly the way that City are at this moment in time. That it's just a team full of confidence. There's tremendous togetherness, which there has to be. You don't win the league without togetherness. So I'm just delighted. I think Guardiola plays football the right way. He's got players who are, I think, uh, excellent. I mean, you've got a team full of stars, but there seems to be a certain humility, humbleness. I mean, it's Gundogan. I mean, we're talking about a player at the top of his game, but he's such a nice bloke. He at least appears to be such a nice man. Again, if you can't help but like City because it doesn't seem to be a team full of egos. Everybody seems to be pulling in the right direction. The joy, genuine joy that they seem to get when they score a goal. Obviously with Gundogan as well, he seems to be a guy that is incredibly popular. So if I wasn't a Leeds fan, I'd love to be a City fan. I think for all sorts of reasons. One, they, they damn well win football games, which is something that I find very unusual.
Yes, prolific goal scoring, clean sheets. What's one of those, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with your wholehearted summary. I think the only thing I would perhaps say is I think you mentioned that they weren't necessarily at their best. I think what you're seeing from Manchester City right now, interestingly, I think, is this evolution to a team that's not just about conventional fullbacks overlapping, plenty of pace, plenty of chances. I mean, they've done that as well this season, let's be very clear. But it's now this kind of methodical breakdown of teams. And it's not just through passing for the sake of passing. They can do that as well. They've gone through multiple iterations of this style where previously it was about lots of attacking play, wingers being direct, ending up at the far post, tap-ins, breaking teams down through kind of getting to the byline, various different ways to kind of break teams down. They've also had kind of just a dominant possession. And now it's this evolution again, kind of playing without fullbacks. Inverted centre backs coming into the middle of the park and various pushing De Bruyne up. It's so many different issues that this team poses, and the only way I can kind of describe it is like this. It's like this mix of. I remember when the great AC Milan team, when they had kind of Seedorf, Gattuso, Kaká, I think it was Ambrosini, but various different. It was just like they just used to pop up everywhere. There was such a well-drilled
Yeah, yeah.
unit in terms of how it worked at the back, but also kind of in the middle of the park. But yet they combine that kind of defensive brilliance with so much kind of attacking kind of puzzles that you just cannot solve in terms of how to press them, where to press them, where to follow, where to be to try and hurt them. They put a premium on conceding chances. They creating opportunities, putting people in positions that they don't want to be. So right now it's a brand of football that I believe we've not seen from Manchester City before. And I think moving forward, no doubt teams will be looking to see how do you solve this new kind of formula. And that's the greatness of a coach in Pep Guardiola, constantly evolving his teams. Yes, he's shopping with the best. He's shopping to the best ingredients that you have, and you'd imagine he'd be able to cook a nice damn meal at the end of it. But even still, this is football of a very different ilk to what we've been used to. But yeah, let's see. You're right, a deserved win on Saturday, and that's 2/3 of the way there to the treble. So yeah, we shall see. Switching topics, Ayub. Back to the Premier League, if we may. Spurs have a new manager, appointing Ange Postecoglou on a 4-year deal. Obviously, they sacked Antonio Conte at the end of March this season, so they've had the best part of, I guess, 10 weeks to really try and get to the bottom of who they want as their next manager. They're now settled on Ange Postecoglou from Celtic, 4-year deal. It's interesting. This one divides opinion in a lot of ways across, I guess, Spurs fans, I imagine, but also across the wider footballing fraternity. What's your immediate reaction to this appointment, and how do you think he'll fare?
Well, firstly, you've been practicing pronouncing his name. Perfect. Excellent.
Thank you.
He's not the first choice or the second choice. I'm not sure exactly whereabouts he's on the list, but he certainly wasn't the first choice. You know my thoughts on certain leagues. So initial thoughts. Anybody that you're getting from the Scottish League, it's I think it's a desperate move. Certainly from my point of view. The reason why I say that is not just the fact that he's managed in Scotland. Prior to that, he managed in Japan, and prior to that, he was, I think, the Australian manager. And if you look at his managerial career, it's Australian side. So there's certainly no clubs or no leagues that he's managed in of any note. His playing career, I think, is predominantly Australia as well. So certainly from a background point of view, uh, it's not so. I certainly don't think he's got a CV to be enthused about. His work at Celtic, fantastic, but I could do a job at Celtic. I'm being serious here. I could do a job at Celtic. Big Sam could do a job at Celtic. I think many a manager could do a job at Celtic. Stevie G, he had a fantastic run at Rangers. What happened? Nothing. We've had managers who have managed in Scotland. Walter Smith as well. I think he was at Everton. I'm not sure what he did, but certainly I think from memory, looking at managers who've managed in Scotland and then come to the Premier League, I don't think many have done that well. Graham Souness, I think, had a fantastic record at Rangers. He won about 300 trophies. He won the league multiple times. I don't think he did too well at Liverpool. It's one where I think those in the know, or certainly some of the journalists that I've read articles by about this coach. The fact that I'm saying this coach, you can tell I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm not going to butcher it. I'll just call him
Ange. Let's do it together. Ange Postecoglou.
Postecoglou. It's quite
Correct.
straightforward, isn't it? Right. So I think there are some journalists who know or talk about the Scottish League, and they're certainly waxing lyrical. That this is not just. I think they're aware of obviously the criticisms or the cheap jibes guys like me will sort of give. But I would sort of think that Spurs it's a high risk strategy. I think if you're playing in the Scottish League, there's only one game that is really tough and there's lots of expectations. That's Rangers. Yes, I would agree that the expectation on a Celtic coach is huge. You have to win trophies. But how many times has he coached a team against an opposition where there's a tremendous amount of pressure? Very rarely. The Premier League is a different animal altogether. So my thoughts are I'll be surprised if he does well. I'll be surprised if he lasts the whole season. Because there's a lot of work needed to be done at Spurs as well. And that's, I'm not sure whether this is an appointment that keeps Kane at Spurs. I've got a feeling that Spurs will go now. If he does go, that's a lot of money that Spurs will get. And maybe I suppose this guy will be able to strengthen. But I just don't think that the job that's needed at Spurs, this is the right guy. If he surprises me, I'll take my hat off to this man. But at this moment in time, I think if I was a Spurs fan, I won't be getting too excited. And I hope, I hope, I mean, I shouldn't be saying that, should I? Hope he fails just to prove me right. No, but it's going to be a difficult gig. I don't think he's got the credentials. He's certainly not experienced enough competition. And as I said, Japan League to the Scottish League. I mean, these are worse than the Farmers League. These are leagues that I don't consider them leagues. So tough job.
It was just interesting hearing you rattling off all these names that have come from the Scottish leagues and have, to your conclusion, failed miserably. You did leave Sir Alex Ferguson out, though, noticeably, because you're right. You're right. He wasn't too shabby, though, was he? At Manchester
He's an exception to the rule.
Indeed.
Most of them have failed.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, a little bit, if I may, a little bit of history, because I am quite enthused about this appointment. Actually, in the end, Ange Postecoglou, born in Greece, 1970, came over to Australia at the age of 5. Emigrated to Australia, more so from his parents in terms of just seeking a better future. He's obviously then settled in South Melbourne. He's had a bit of a playing career. I think represented his country 4 times as well. Australia, South Melbourne, and please don't giggle at you, but he's won a couple of national titles at South Melbourne. I've asked.
I can't believe.
Well,
You
listen,
know,
you've got to be fair. You've
I,
got to be fair. You've got to be fair. He's won a couple of nice national titles at South Melbourne. He's then obviously gone on to coach.
you're going to tell me that he won the parent, like he was the Parents Player of the Year or something like that as well.
No,
Might as
come
well
on.
go the whole hog, my friend.
This is unfair. Come on, but he's then he's ended up at Brisbane Roar. He's won a couple of national titles there. First coach, I think, to win 4 national titles. You're right. He's then after a little stint coaching the kind of youth setups for Australia, he's ended up as the Australia national coach. He was their coach in the 2014 World Cup. He was drawn in a group with Spain, Netherlands, and Chile. Tough group. Yes, lost all three, but actually they were very competitive in all 3 games, and they gave him or allowed him to continue to qualify for the next World Cup, which he did 2018, but he left the role before then. He's then ended up in Japan. He's won a national title there as well. So yes, in the leagues that he's gone to, he's been successful. To your point, what's the credibility of those leagues? And I think that's a valid point. But that's the journey he's been on. He's then ended up after a while at Celtic, and obviously this was off the back of Steven Gerrard's campaign at Rangers, where he's delivered a title for Rangers, their first in quite some time. I think over a decade. I think if I remember correctly, he was kind of looking to stop them winning the 10 in a row. I think it was. That was the famous kind of mantra throughout that season, if memory serves. He's won back-to-back Scottish Premier League titles. Scored, to your point, 113 goals, I think it was, last season. I think in my notes, 114 goals, 92 goals the season before, plus goal difference of plus 80, plus 70. Yes, you're right. It's a league dominated by Celtic in recent times. But yeah, won a couple of Scottish Cups, won another League Cup as well. So 5 trophies in his 2 seasons at Celtic. And I think what I would say about him is, in terms of his CV, I think, yes, you could question it, right? But more and more when I think about managerial appointments, especially in the modern day, I do think that there's so much more than simply, and I truly mean this, there's more than just simply looking at a CV and thinking this guy is going to get us to where we need to get to. Spurs have, to some extent, gone down that road after Pochettino, right? I mean, they've appointed Mourinho, talk of him being a proven winner, when the recent evidence before that time was a coach who, yeah, again, he won a trophy at Manchester United, but it was a coach who was coming into the headlines for all the wrong reasons, let's say, and there was some talk that he wasn't the right fit, and in the end, that proved to be the case at Spurs. They then, after an unbelievably protracted managerial chase, ended up with Nuno, if you remember. Again, after a strong August, they've then fired him in a matter of months. They then kind of overcorrected there afterwards, because there was this unbelievable prize available, which was Antonio Conte. Again, a proven winner, a disciplinarian in a lot of ways, similar of the ilk to Jose Mourinho, but that's not worked out for the most part, irrespective of them finishing in the Champions League spots the season before. The point is, we sometimes make a big deal about appointments where we're looking for a sure thing. Everyone wants a sure thing. And the greatest indicator of future events is past events. And ultimately, and I understand that, because it gives us comfort. It gives us comfort to know this person's done this before. But I think if you look at some of the appointments, again, Mourinho at United, in the end, it didn't quite work out. LVG at United, coaches that came with great pedigree, they were kind of turfed out within a certain period of time. Conte at Spurs, even maybe Unai Emery at Arsenal. You may argue, right, but the football at the end, a year and a half in, was to the point where, the fans spoke with their, I guess, voiced their displeasure quite clearly. And similarly, you have other coaches, to your point. Obviously, the most famous one, I think, is Sir Alex. Yes, he won the league title with Aberdeen. Aberdeen weren't necessarily a bad team. He actually took over the season after they finished second to Rangers. So it wasn't a case of he took Aberdeen from nowhere to win the Scottish Championship. They were a pretty good team, and obviously won the European Cup Winners' Cup for Aberdeen. Unbelievable achievement, irrespective, and then come to United, and the rest is history. But even Arsene Wenger, unheralded, comes to Arsenal from Japan, and again leaves his legacy. So my point is, the more I think about it, the more I think about it helps to come in and have some equity with the team straight away, and that only comes from a record. If a team and a set of fans can see, hang on, he's a coach who we should be patient with. That always helps from the start, because whenever you have then a tricky start or a difficult period early on, the fans will normally ride it out with you, because you've got a little bit of equity to work with. So if I look at his character, he spoke famously about how he likes to build his teams in a way that his dad would like to watch him. So there's something about him that I like. I don't know whether it's just this humanity or this kind of character or this resolve in terms of the journey that he's taken up to this point. I mean, I think the first Australian coach in the Premier League, I believe. I just like there's something about his spirit that I actually think at this moment in time when the Spurs fan base is a little dejected, a little downbeat, not least because of where they are, but also what their North London rivals are doing right now in terms of making noises at the top end of the league. I just think he's going to be able to hopefully galvanize the fan base. And if I can say anything, I really hope genuinely that he gets some time because they've had 10 weeks to do their due diligence. So there's accountability on the board, Ayub. And now that you've made that choice, it's incumbent on the board to back him at the first sign of trouble. So not just to be reactionary when the fans start kicking up a stink if they've lost 3 on the bounce. If he can start to slowly build an identity, slowly start to get them playing in a way that's attractive, but also where you can see, all right, I can see where it's going. Again, I really hope they just give him a time to build a philosophy and an identity. And I really just have this feeling that he's actually, whether he's going to get him back into the big time, and I'm talking challenging for Premier League titles, time will tell. I'm not going to go that far. I don't know. But I do like the appointment. I think there's something about him that I don't know. Just I think over time, I think he will win these Tottenham fans over. The key question will be, will Tottenham fans, but also the board, be patient as and when that difficult time comes, which it invariably will.
Well, I'm not sure about the patience because I think Tottenham fans have been patient for a number of years. So I think this is it's an important appointment because they've had some big names. I mean, you're talking about 2 of the biggest names in management at this moment in time, Mourinho and Conte. So they've obviously tried some heavyweights. This is slightly, I suppose, left field because it's not perhaps what you would have expected at the start. I mean, I'm not sure which other managers are available at this moment in time, but certainly I think I'd like to know what the list was because I'm certain that this guy probably is about 3 or 4 on the list. So I'd like to know who number 1 was, number 2 was, number 3 was. But it's somebody who needs to deliver the expectation. I mean, as I said, in Scottish football, the only time that he must have really felt pressure was the game against Rangers. This is going to be different. So he's had over 20 years of management experience. I don't really think, I mean, even managing the national side, I mean, I think the expectation of managing Australia is different. So a good game, if you lose 2-1, perhaps is a decent result. So in the J League, I'm not sure. Again, it's not a league that I give any value to. So I'm not sort of thinking it's a league full of pressure. So he's a manager who's got a great deal of managerial experience, but he's got precious little experience of dealing with pressure situations and huge expectations. Yes, in Scotland at Celtic there is a huge expectations, but in a sense, the expectation really is tested when you play Rangers. Every other game is it's pretty straightforward. You're expected to win, and you really invariably will win. The Spurs fans have been quite pained over recent times. Are they going to give him any time? Let's say the season starts and it's not a great start. Is he going to be afforded that time? I don't think he will.
Yeah, I think, look, it's yet to be seen. And you're absolutely right. There's a real strong, I mean, I might be an Arsenal fan, but I like to think I'm a fair and objective one. I really think they've appointed him now. And I think you got to remember when he went into Celtic, it was famously after Eddie Howe rejected the job or it fell through. I don't know if you remember, but so he stepped into a fan base at that time. Famously, Alan Brazil on Talk Sport ridiculed the appointment that he won.
He's an idiot. I don't listen to. I mean, how on earth that man sort of steals a living on the radio, I'll never know. But move on. Sorry.
These are not opinions shared by the Just Onside crew. These are the personal opinions of Ayub Patel. I can give you his address.
The disclaimer?
Oh, right, that is the disclaimer. I'm going to have to start putting it at the bottom of our episode descriptions. But anyway, we'll move on. But no, in the end, what I'm saying is at Celtic also, he's had to overcome this kind of sense of, well, who is this guy? What's he about? And what have you? And I do think it's not helpful. It helps to have some support from the outset, some sort of inbuilt equity, like I say. You heard, sometimes I think it is this case of, I don't want to suggest it's something more sinister, but you remember the famous comments Graham Souness made about Roberto De Zerbi,
Mm,
where when he first came in, he said, well, he doesn't know this league. Well, of course not. I mean, if there's got to be a time for a first for everything. Arsene Wenger
mm.
didn't know this league. Look at the legacy he left. Look at Alex Ferguson when he first came in at Manchester United. Yes, he had some sticky years at the start. My point is, this idea that we're always going to know this league, well, you don't. Otherwise, it'll just be the same managers constantly recycling one another, recycling each other's roles within the Premier League. You're always going to. I think the modern day football requires a great deal of due diligence, a great deal of understanding what makes the man, what. If you look at, it's really interesting. I was looking at the table this season, this just this evening, the top 10, and it's really interesting the level of, I would say, job satisfaction, or let's say job security that all of these coaches enjoy. I'm just going to run them through you and you'll see what I'm trying to say. Man City, Guardiola, they wouldn't change him. When I say they wouldn't change it, what I'm saying is he's got 100% kind of loyalty rate, let's say right now. Mikel Arteta, 100% loyalty rate. Eric Ten Hag, 100% loyalty rate. Eddie Howe, 100% loyal. Liverpool, Klopp. Brighton, De Zerbi. Emery at Villa for what he's done this season. Obviously, Ange Postecoglou at Spurs. Thomas Frank at Brentford, 100% loyalty. And then you've got Fulham, Marco Silva. I would argue again, he's done a stunning job. My point is, I'm not saying there's a kind of, it's just kind of interesting to me when I look down those coaches and say all those families are pretty, I would say, steadfast that we've got the right man for our clubs. And yes, that can all change in quite a quick way. And my point is, I just think sometimes you've got to give a man a time to see what's his human element that he brings. Is he good at galvanizing the troops? Is he good at bringing players together? Because that's one of the great assets that he's got on his had for the Chelsea game. I hear you loud and clear, Yub. He's going to be playing pressurized games week in, week out. Absolutely. 3 points in the Premier League is worth a lot more than 3 points in the Scottish League. The quality level is night and day in terms of the difference. Again, I just think they've looked at it and thought he's somebody who unites. He's not somebody who's like a Mourinho or Conte who's often trying to, not saying divide people, but always saying something. You're thinking, what does he mean by that? What's he saying here? Psychological warfare and what have you. I think he's somebody. He's a strong, sturdy character physically, but I think he's somebody that the Spurs fans will get behind because of, again, I think the spirit in which he'll coach and he'll manage. And I think if you watch, for example, De Zerbi, and I'm not saying there's any similarities, I think some of his lure and attraction in some ways is his kind of spirit on the sidelines and his kind of feistiness and obviously his style is clear. You can tell. I always say when you see a manager's style on the pitch, you can kind of tell, oh, this is De Zerbi's team, this is Guardiola's team. So look, I do think I have a feeling. I have a good feeling about this appointment for Spurs. I really do. I don't look too much into how he's come from Celtic because I've seen just as many high-profile managers with pedigree and a long resume fail at big jobs, and we've seen it everywhere. So I think he'll do okay if the board show a level of patience with him.
I think you could be right. I mean, and you just alluded to the point there. We've had Mourinho, we've had Conte, two characters with quite abrasive personalities. So maybe, and by all accounts, I have no idea exactly what this guy's coaching forte is, but certainly from the reports that I've read, he's a very much he sort of tries to create great bonds. There's a lot of affection from the players towards him. So maybe that's exactly what Spurs need with Mourinho and with Conte, especially with Conte. There is a distance. I think he's a coach that doesn't sort of he's not one for familiarity. I think Mourinho is. I think Mourinho is a strange character. I think he's quite a strong character and sometimes maybe appears aloof. But I think he's a coach that I think there's a great deal of affection from players towards Mourinho. But those haven't worked. Coaches with great track records, great CV. So maybe you never know.
Yeah, on a side note, you mentioned that Jose Mourinho is a strong character. I mean, yeah, Anthony Taylor found out to his
Oh
detriment
yes,
last
I
week.
love that.
So,
Oh,
I'm
I
sure
love
he
all
did.
of that.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you appreciated the events at the airport as well, Ayub. Yes, but maybe one to cover on a future episode. Yeah, we wish him well, Ange Postecoglou. I think honestly, I like characters, and I think he's a bit of a character, and I genuinely think the fan base will like him over time. I think he'll speak their language, and what I mean by that is in terms of playing slowly, kind of ingraining an identity where he will play a style that Spurs fans can relate to and will appreciate and will enjoy. Of course, the big issue is, I mean, they're obviously losing Lloris this summer, but again, it's all about Harry Kane this summer. Again, one that we'll probably get into in a future episode, but that's a huge talking point, and one that I guess it's not even in his hands to resolve. That will be decided by his paymasters, as well as Harry Kane and perhaps other clubs. So that is a situation to keep our eyes on. Brilliant, Ayub. I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much for joining. Yeah, any prevailing thoughts on the cup final, or is it all eyes on Istanbul now?
Oh, all eyes on Istanbul now. I called it, I think, weeks and weeks ago. So I'm standing by my prediction.
I thought
Yeah, Toria, and his curse has been lifted. It's a done deal, which I think in the shorts is exactly what I say.
This is the best line ever. Yeah, absolutely. We should hopefully be recording again on Thursday. This is Tuesday afternoon or late afternoon that we're recording, or early evening, I should say. So hopefully this episode will drop tomorrow. We'll be recording again on Thursday with all eyes on that big game in the Champions League final. Will Ayub be proven right with his prediction from many moons ago that Man City will win the Champions League? You would be hard pressed to find many who will predict or bet against them. So Ayub, yeah, thank you very much for joining. I'll hopefully see you on the next one. Just before we wrap up, again, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Give the episode a like, drop a comment. What did you think of Manchester City's FA Cup title win? What do you think of Ange Postecoglou's appointment at Spurs? Will he succeed? What will he need to succeed? And how do you see that faring out? Brilliant. Hopefully, we shall sign off at that point. And if we don't, yeah, we'll see you on the very next episode. See you then.